You didn't go to Japan for love. You didn't move to Japan because you were searching for love. You moved because at 26 you had quietly realized that your life back home wasn't as solid as you once pretended it was. You had a degree, the same one thousands of others earned that year. You had a car, one that made a strange sound every time you turned left. You had relationships, short enough that your friends stopped remembering names and started using descriptions instead. At home, people kept asking, "So what's the plan?" And the truth was, you didn't have one. What you did have was an online TEFL certificate, a one-way ticket to Narita, and the stubborn confidence of someone who believed things would somehow work out. You told yourself it was temporary. 1 year. That was it. Arrival in Tokyo. When you arrived in Tokyo, you weren't carrying much. A suitcase filled mostly with hoodies, some savings, and exhaustion heavier than your luggage. The first week blurred together. Convenience store meals, awkward translation mistakes, long train rides where you felt invisible. Tokyo wasn't a neon dream. It was a system. Millions of people moving with precision. Trains arriving exactly on time. Sidewalks flowing like organized rivers. And you felt slightly out of place inside it. The apartment in Koenji. You found a small apartment in Koenji. 1 room. A kitchen barely large enough to be called a kitchen. Walls thin enough that your neighbor's alarm became your alarm. The rent was considered reasonable for Tokyo. By any other standard, it was a closet with plumbing. At night, you stared at the ceiling and wondered if this was bravery or escape, work and routine. You started teaching at a conversation school in Shinjuku. The salary sounded decent until you calculated everything: rent, train pass, utilities, taxes, insurance. Very little remained. You learned to survive cheaply. A simple beef bowl became your regular dinner. Inexpensive, filling, predictable. The staff didn't know your name. They knew your order. In a city this large, that felt like something. An October night in Shibuya. You met her on a Tuesday night in October at a language exchange in Shibuya. You were there because your apartment felt too quiet. She was there to practice English. You mispronounced a Japanese word. She corrected you calmly and directly. Back home, it might have sounded blunt. Here, it felt honest. You laughed. She laughed too. And something unexpected shifted between you. The growing connection. You met again. Coffee first, then dinner, then long walks that lasted far longer than planned. She showed you quiet shrines hidden between buildings, small neighborhood shops, old streets where the city felt slower. Tokyo didn't change, but the way it felt to you did. For the first time, the city felt possible. Careful trust. She was cautious at the beginning. Not cold, just careful. She chose her words thoughtfully. She didn't rush into personal stories. Later, you learned someone had broken her trust before you ever arrived in Japan. The distance you felt wasn't rejection. It was protection. And when she slowly lowered those walls, you understood how serious that was. Families and questions. A year passed. Your families met through video calls. Your mother began asking about marriage. Her father asked structured questions about your future, savings, plans, stability. You answered carefully. You wanted to be seen as more than just a foreign teacher passing through. Scene 9. The proposal. There was no dramatic skyline, no expensive restaurant, just a Sunday morning, rain against the window, coffee growing cold, a broken heater that still hadn't been fixed. You didn't even have a ring yet. You asked her simply. She said yes before you finished speaking. Then she laughed. That same surprised laugh from the first night. And in that quiet apartment, it felt like everything was finally moving in the right direction. The wedding in Nagoya. The wedding was small. A shrine in Nagoya. Her parents' choice. And honestly, you were relieved. Planning had never been your strength. Your mother cried at the airport, cried at the hotel, cried during rehearsal, and cried again during the ceremony. One of Akiko's relatives handed her a handkerchief, and somehow that small gesture became the beginning of a quiet bond between the families. Your father and hers sat beside each other in near silence for almost an hour. Later, both described it as a good conversation. It wasn't cinematic, it was real, and real felt enough. Staying in Japan, you decided to stay. The teaching job evolved into something more stable, more responsibility, slightly better pay. You moved from the tiny Koenji apartment to a modest place in Nakameguro, a window overlooking the canal, a kitchen big enough for 2 people. You bought a couch, a bookshelf, a dented lamp from a flea market because she said it had character. Life began to feel structured, not accidental. Scene 3. Belonging. The neighborhood started recognizing you. The dry cleaner asked about your week. The owner of a small izakaya greeted you like a regular instead of a tourist. You weren't just passing through anymore. You were building something. Hana's birth. Then Hana was born. Nothing prepares you for that moment. You watch someone you love redefine the meaning of strength. And then suddenly, there is a cry. Suddenly, there is a person. Just over 3 kilograms. Her mother's nose. Your ears. An expression deeply offended by existence. When they placed her in your arms, everything before that moment felt like rehearsal. The first months. For 3 months, no one slept. Your apartment became a system of shifts, one holding the baby, one collapsing into temporary unconsciousness. Meeting in the kitchen at 3 a.m. Exhausted, silent, united in survival. Her parents came from Nagoya to help. Her mother quietly took over night duties. Her father held Hana carefully, nodded at you once. It was small, but it meant something. Small milestones. Hana at 6 months wrapped her hand around your finger and refused to let go. Hana at 9 months said something that might have been Papa if you were generous. You were generous. Hana at 1 year took uncertain steps across the living room and fell into your arms like she had discovered gravity for the first time. Saturday mornings. You created routines, the same bedtime book every night. 2 mice cooking a giant pancake in the forest. She always fell asleep on page 11. You kept reading the rest quietly. Stopping mid-story felt wrong. Saturday mornings became sacred. Tamagoyaki in the kitchen, bad coffee, rice scattered everywhere. At the park, she grabbed your hair from your shoulders and laughed. A laugh identical to her mother's. For a while, you weren't building life. You were inside it. And it fit. The subtle shift. Then something changed. Not dramatically, not suddenly. Her mother mentioned children benefit from growing up near extended family. Her father's health began declining. Akiko spent more time on the phone in the other room. When she returned, she said everything was fine, but it sounded unfinished. Nagoya entered conversations more often. There was warmth in her voice when she spoke about it. The 1 month. She asked to take Hana to Nagoya for a month. Her father needed support. Hana was young enough to adapt. You trusted her. You put them on the Shinkansen at Tokyo Station. Hana waved from the window with both hands. You waved until the train disappeared. Extended time. A month passed, then 6 weeks. Then more time was needed. You began flying to Nagoya on weekends. Each time Hana ran toward you, her small body hitting your legs became the best moment of your week. But you noticed things. A pediatrician you hadn't discussed. Daycare enrollment mentioned casually. Individually small. Together, something else. The call. 3 months in, Akiko called one Wednesday evening. Her voice didn't sound uncertain. It sounded resolved. She said they needed to talk seriously. She said she didn't think she was coming back to Tokyo. She said she was sorry. She said she loved you. All of it could be true at once. The conversation. You went to Nagoya. You sat at the same table where her father once questioned your future. There was no villain. She wasn't cruel. You weren't innocent. She wanted Hana to grow up near family. She wanted to stay where she felt rooted. None of it was unreasonable. And that was what made it impossible to fight. You weren't confronting betrayal. You were confronting divergence. And slowly, painfully, the life you built began reorganizing itself around your absence. The lawyer in Nagoya. You found a family law attorney in Nagoya. She spoke fluent English and carried herself with the calm precision of someone used to delivering life-altering facts. She explained everything carefully. In Japan, custody is typically awarded to one parent. Almost always the parent the child is currently living with. Hana had been in Nagoya for 3 months. That mattered. The status quo. You told her you had been there for the first 2 years. You woke at 3 a.m. You knew the bedtime page. You knew her pediatrician, her shoe size, the way she held a crayon. The lawyer nodded. She said Japanese courts prioritize stability, current routine, current residence, current environment. The status quo becomes the foundation for the ruling. And right now, the status quo was Nagoya. Every extension you agreed to would be interpreted as acceptance. Joint custody. You asked about joint custody. For decades, Japan did not formally recognize joint custody after divorce. A legal framework had been introduced in 2024, she explained, but implementation remained gradual. In practice, most cases still resulted in sole custody for one parent and visitation for the other. You asked what visitation looked like, typically once a month, a few hours, sometimes supervised. She said it plainly. You sat there letting your mind catch up. Once a month, a few hours. The wall. You asked what would happen if you took Hana back to Tokyo without consent. She paused. It would be considered abduction under Japanese law, criminal charges, arrest, and you would lose any remaining standing in court. It wasn't a threat. It was a wall. You asked about international enforcement. Japan had joined the Hague Convention in 2014, she said, but enforcement could be inconsistent. Foreign custody orders were not automatically recognized. You left her office and walked through Nagoya for hours. Standing still felt like surrender. 14 months. The legal process lasted 14 months. You flew between Tokyo and Nagoya constantly. Savings drained. Work performance slipped. Patience from your employer thinned. The apartment in Nakamaguro felt frozen. The dented lamp remained on the shelf. The couch still held the shape of where she used to sit. Every object assumed continuity. Continuity no longer existed. The verdict. The ruling came on a Tuesday. Sole custody to Akiko. Visitation to you. Once per month, 4 hours in Nagoya. The document was formal, final. You read it 3 times. The words did not change. The first visitation. The visitation took place at a community center, a small room, a table, toys arranged neatly, a staff member seated discreetly in the corner. Hana was 3 now, longer hair, different clothes. She looked at you with recognition and uncertainty. As if your face belonged to a story she was trying to remember, you sat on the floor beside her. You brought the same book. Page 11. She noticed the book immediately. Something softened. You began reading. You did the voices. She leaned against you on page 4. Earlier than before. You kept reading all the way through. She fell asleep on page 11. The same page as always. You finished the remaining pages quietly because stopping halfway through a story still felt wrong. Time is up. The staff member eventually said, "Time is up." You closed the book carefully. Akiko stood at the door. She lifted Hana gently. Hana stirred, looked at you, and gave a small wave. Already turning back toward the life that continued without you. You remained seated after they left. The apartment. You sat in your car for nearly 40 minutes because your hands would not stop shaking. Later, you flew back to Tokyo. You unlocked the apartment door. Inside, everything was exactly as you had left it. And that was the hardest part. Time didn't stop. After the court decision, time did not stop. Trains still ran on schedule. Students still arrived for class. Seasons still shifted along the canal outside your apartment window. But your life had been reduced to a calendar with one day circled in red each month. 4 hours. You began measuring time differently. Not in weeks, not in projects, in visits. The new routine. The first months felt mechanical. You took the early train to Nagoya, a small backpack with snacks, wipes, extra clothes, habits from when you were needed for everything. At the community center, Hana slowly grew more comfortable again. Children adapt, but adaptation is not the same as understanding. Sometimes she ran to you immediately. Sometimes she hesitated just a little too long. Each reaction carried weight. Compressing fatherhood. You learned to compress fatherhood into 4 hours. You played harder, listened closer, memorized details, new words she was learning, songs from daycare, the way she now held crayons differently. You asked careful questions, never confrontational, never bitter, just present. You never argued in front of her, never let the staff member see frustration. Your emotions became disciplined, precise, contained. After the visit, when the 4 hours ended, you packed slowly. Sometimes Hana cried, sometimes she didn't. Both hurt. Back in Tokyo, the apartment felt less like a home and more like a waiting room. You considered leaving Japan many nights. You stood by the canal in Nakamaguro, calculating distance between continents. Leaving would be easier, but leaving would end the 4 hours. So, you stayed. Structured around access. You adjusted your work schedule to protect visitation days. Saved carefully. avoided risks. Your life became structured around access. Gradually, your thinking shifted. You had lost daily presence. You had lost routine, but you had not lost your daughter. Lighter supervision. Over time, supervision eased. You were allowed unsupervised time at nearby parks. Hannah turned 4, then 5. She began asking clearer questions. Why don't you live with us? There is no simple answer, so you answered simply. Grown-ups sometimes live in different places, but I will always come see you. You made no promises you could not legally guarantee. You built trust within boundaries. Page 11, again. One Saturday, you brought the same book. The Two Mice. The Giant Pancake. She could read parts of it herself now. She turned the pages slowly. When she reached page 11, she paused, looked at you, and said, "This is where I used to fall asleep." You smiled. Yes, it is. She did not remember everything, but she remembered that. The bridge. The system had reduced your time, reorganized your life, drawn strict lines around your role, but it had not erased you. You were no longer building a life the way you once imagined. You were maintaining a bridge. Bridges are not homes. They are structures of connection. They require patience, maintenance, repetition, clarity. Years ago, you came to Japan without a real plan, just a certificate, a ticket, ambition. Now you stayed with clarity, not because it was easy, not because it was fair, but because once a month, for 4 hours, a little girl would run toward you, and that was enough to anchor an entire life. The quiet apartment. Tokyo remained precise, structured. You once felt caught inside it. Now you understood it differently. Some structures hold you, some test you, and some cannot define the depth of a bond that began long before a courtroom tried to measure it. The apartment was still quiet, but it was no longer empty.